Hey guys, Mike here. So, interesting day in the market, or a big day in the market, especially for some stocks. Looks like meme stock mania was back. The indexes didn't do much of nothing today. The big boys didn't do a whole lot. Apple had a nice pop. Google had a decent drop in the morning just because Apple backstabbed them. We'll get into that, of course. And I'm also going to show you something that I think will shock you because it shocked me. I never would have guessed it, right? I don't play this sector, but boy, this narrative about how this one sector, if it's going up, it's terrible for the market and the economy and all this other stuff. And when I show you these charts, I'm pretty sure you're going to be as shocked as I was to see how this sector has handily outperformed the S&P in not just like the last 2 years. I mean, going back just 20 years, right? 24 years actually. And coming forward, you can see, and of course the Fed is the one that actually changed the whole narrative around the government, that is, of how and why this sector does not outperform the S&P anymore. But when you look at this, I think it'll put at least a different perspective for you on it. But, looking at, and it also is another sector of stocks that was up really green today, and this week is a huge week for them. Like, this is the make or break week. Like, a lot of them report earnings, and they're either going to hit a home run, or all the bad news is baked in, like Apple was and Tesla, and they're just going to continue to go up. Okay, so we'll get into those. But when you look, it's all about the meme stocks, baby. In case you missed it, you might have noticed we had a flashback here. You had GameStop, AMC, and these others right here, but really, it was GameStop and AMC, man. I mean, just going to the moon. And what's really funny is what started this whole thing supposedly was this right here. This picture of Roaring Kitty sitting up with a game controller in his hand, right? And you see GameStop, it just shoots up, goes to the moon. It had already been running up last week, but then just massive 100% move very, very quickly. Okay, very, very quickly. And you can see once they hit up there and got them, I think it was like 105% total, then boom, massive dump down right there. And of course, what are they using to make this happen? Of course, zero DT options, usually out of the money and stuff. You see right here, I mean, 50% of basically all option volume on the S&P and pretty much anything at this point in time is these zero DT options, right? So this is what's changed the market. It allows stuff like this to happen for sure. And you can just see it happening today. I mean, if you pulled up the 34 call and just watched it, you would just see thousands upon thousands of these call options coming in, which of course is forcing the market makers to do what? They're the ones selling you the options to buy the stock, right? And it just drove it up so fast. But the reason why I know it was coordinated, and again, hats off to whoever's coordinating, whether it's Wall Street Bets or whatever group, is because if you pull up a chart of GameStop and AMC, you will see a 60-second window right there where they dump GameStop and then immediately roll into AMC. And AMC just takes off. It was only up like 20%. It just takes off and goes to almost 100% in a matter of like nothing, right? While GameStop continues to come down. And so, again, if you got left up there at $34, sorry for that. Maybe it'll pump tomorrow for you, and you can get back out of there. As far as the day is concerned, you were exit liquidity, of course, but that's how these things work, right? So congratulations if you were in it or involved in that. I've never been able to figure out the Wall Street Bets thing. I try to figure out the code. I don't know how they're coordinating, how they got the messages. I almost think that picture is some kind of like, you can write messages in there that you can't see with the naked eye, but you can have a special kind of glasses where you can actually see it. It's almost like some Mission Impossible stuff or whatever to tell you, because there has to be coordination on what calls they're buying, when they're going to buy them, when they're going to dump them, when they're going to buy AMC calls, drive that one up. But I think what's funny, if you think about this, there's going to come a time, right, where people one day are going to have to sit down with their grandkids or have the conversation, right, with them and just telling them about a day like today, maybe, right, or maybe back in the past when GameStop pumped before. And, and say, yeah, I made all this money in the market. And they're going to say, really, how'd you do that on that day? Well, I bought this GameStop stuff, one day. And they said, why'd you buy it? He goes, well, I woke up, looked at my Twitter, and this person named Roaring Kitty. And they go, Roaring Kitty? Yeah, don't worry about the name. I know it's silly. But Roaring Kitty posted a picture of him leaning forward in a chair with a game console. And they're going to say, okay, so why'd you buy? Well, because he's leaning forward and he has a game console. Okay, what does that mean? That means he's taking notice and he's got his game face on with his game controller and it's time to play the game, baby. That's what that means. You don't get that? And so that conversation is going to be told many years from now. And so, of course, your grandchild, who you tell a story to, will go out there and he'll say, hey, Grandpa, I made a lot of money one day. He said, wow, what'd you do? And he'll say, some guy posted a picture of a guy catching a fish. and he was leaning forward or something, and that's it's going to continue on. But that's where the market is now, right? That's what we're in. So whether it's Wall Street bets or whoever, hats off to you. If you happen to know how they come up with coordinating that, please let us know in the comments. Would love to see it. But congratulations to anybody if you're making a boatload of money on that one. Now the other group of stocks that has a big week this week with big earnings that was pumping today was obviously your Chinese stocks, right? These have been breaking out. I will say on a side note, I was stunned that the EVs from China were all green today. This one shocked me, and just real quick, the reason why I was shocked, as I told the members of the morning news brief, is because Biden and his administration is supposedly coming out, and they're going to follow the Trump way and raise tariffs, and not just by a little bit, from like 25% to 100%. And so that's why you might have noticed solar stocks, things like that, were actually green as well. But the fact that Chinese EV stocks are green, I was just really surprised, because it's going to be a 25, maybe to 100% increase on Chinese EVs. And so that was really surprising to me. And they're trying to level the playing field on the solar or something like that. But they were green. So again, all these were green. And one reason you saw this being green is supposedly China is set to start about $138 billion special sovereign bond sale Friday. Just curious, like, for liquidity and stuff, but would you buy a Chinese bond? I'm just curious. I know I personally would not, but I was wondering if you would, right? Maybe you know something about it and we don't. But again, this follows this trend of these long-term trend lines getting broken out of course, after these stocks have been absolutely just destroyed by their own country. Nothing to do with us, but in their own country doing it. And I mean, you can see they report earnings tomorrow morning, right? And so if we pull up the moving averages, not only do you got to break out, I mean, this stock right here is above all its moving averages, okay? And so that actually is a plus thing to see. Actually tested the 200 and then moved up again. Now, earnings, of course, have not been very good with this stock, right? So depending on how much bad news is baked in and everything else to whether or not this is going to continue. That's the big thing. Because again, we've seen moves and stuff a lot. You can see on that pattern right there, breakout, and keeps failing at the trend line. But now we're finally above a trend line. But you can also see, I mean, it's in this volume gap. Like I said, if it gets in that volume gap, it can go pretty fast, and that's what's happened so far. But again, it's going to start hitting resistance for sure. So we'll see if it gaps up to this resistance or above it, or we end up heading back down on bad earnings. Now, Baidu's the same thing. Broke out of this trend line right here. Again, those trend lines are about a year to 2 years old. Some of them older than that. This one right here, you see the volume profile, it has a lot of resistance above it for sure. There's no ifs or buts about that, but it's in a small volume gap, which has been moving through. If we come even closer, you can see that gap is much larger, going up between like 120, 130, that kind of stuff. So again, this one reports earnings Thursday. And so if this one comes out, okay, again, earnings has been really bad for this one. It's a little different, though, in the moving averages where it hadn't got past this 200. These ADRs, when it comes to moving averages, they tend, I don't know, sometimes they respect it, sometimes they don't. It's kind of like when they want to do it. It's not like a regular stock with these ADRs and the way they move and stuff. But the important part is when they break those long-term trend lines to the downside, you get a nice move up, which is what they've had. So now earnings will tell the full story. But again, you can do this on any index, and that's why I said this for weeks. I was like, if the HSI, probably said this months ago actually, ever breaks that trend line, you're going to see a huge explosion, and you can see it. You'll see it on the S&P, the Qs, the Dow. It don't matter what you're talking about. I don't care if it's India, whatever. When that happens, that's a long time it's been sitting down like that, right? It's an explosive move, and that's just where we're at. Now we get to see if earnings and news and the market wants to continue to push these up. Now, Apple, you might have noticed, had a green day. It was up 2% right out of the gates, right? You might notice Google was down 2% right out of the gates. This right here that's a 200 moving average at the very top, 100 right below it, and the 50 down there, okay? So it did retest that 100, or 200, excuse me, rode it up. I want to see what happens when we hit this trend line right here, because that'll be our third touch, and it's around like 187-ish, so 187 to 188. If it gets rejected or not, I actually break above that. But the reason why it was green was because they basically backstabbed Google and went with Microsoft, or at least they're trying to work out a deal with Microsoft, who, of course, backs OpenAI, right? So they want to use this for Siri and stuff. And I'm sure you remember they were in talks with Google. I assume those talks are dead. I mean, we'll have to figure that one out. But if this agreement gets done or not, and that's why Google, when you look at that one, It was actually red today. It did a decent recovery. I'm expecting it to hit this trend line, to be honest with you, 'cause that would give us our fourth touch on that. And I can definitely see that coming down, which also help close that gap before moving back up. The reason why I'd be surprised if we don't come down and hit it is because this has been such a constructive move up on this one, this big move and stuff. And so it's done very well for basing out, setting some support levels on its way up and all that good stuff. So I'll be surprised if we don't do that in the next few weeks. But again, we'll see what happens and see if these talks are really dead with Google. Because if Microsoft and them don't get an agreement, guess what? Now, Tesla was green today, and really what happened was Friday, what did it do? It grinded down, filled this gap, and so when it opened up today, boom. This is usually what's going to happen when you fill a gap like that. And immediately, of course, started to sell down the rest of the day. And what you can see, plain Jane, is there's a trend line there, right? Right there, boom. And so it hit that trend line, rejected off, and again, this usually results eventually in an explosive move up for Tesla. This is how Tesla moves, especially if the options market's with it. And so we'll have to see how far down it wants to reject, if it wants to come down to between 158, 162. If it continues this downward pressure, that's what we're going to have to find out. Again, it was just, and I don't know if really the explosion up was the gap also with the tariffs and stuff going on, China EVs maybe. I figured that would be good news for Tesla. But the fact it just started selling off the rest of the day didn't really, bolster that. But again, it's a news event. It's still downward pressure on this one. So we'll see. Watch between 158 and 163 if it continues to sell down. But if it can break that trend line, you can have a nice explosive move up to around 183, which would be nice for Tesla. Now, when you look over here, you can see with Disney, it's holding its trend line. Again, this is the third touch right there. I know one of the executives stepped in and bought a whole boatload of shares right there. So it is holding that. It didn't feel the full gap, which you can see to the left right there. I feel probably maybe 50% of it. And so again, you got this big gap above, you got a gap down below. So if it breaks that trend line, I mean, we're definitely feeling that gap down to 98. There's no doubt about that. But if we can continue the bounce up and the market starts to move up, it'll probably carry Disney right along with it, of course. And if we look at the volume profile, you can see, I think I was talking about this last week or the week before, when I was saying this thing really needs a bounce, because if it breaks that trend line, it's going to fall down that volume gap right there and definitely get us down to around 98 bucks. And if it starts to move up, look between 110, 114, obviously, for the near-term price targets right there, and then 118 right above that. Now, as I said before, the thing that might really surprise you is a certain sector where everybody's taught that, oh man, if that's going up, it's not good for the market or the economy or whatever it is. But, again, I talked about this last week, I believe it was, and I showed you, and everybody's about how utilities were outperforming. Oh, this is a terrible thing and all that good stuff. And that is the case because it is considered defensive. But I think what really might surprise you is how utilities, not very long ago, used to outdo the S&P. And you might go, what are you talking about? Look at the last two bull runs. This right here is from 03 to 07-ish right here. And look at utilities, up 111% over, 5 years or something, 4 years. And the S&P was up a whopping 63%. Look what happened when we get on the next bull run. Utilities and SPY were dead even going through 2013. And then, of course, the Fed got involved, started buying mortgage-backed securities, being the biggest buyer of bonds. And then you had these tech companies like Meta and Tesla coming out and all this stuff, and NVIDIA. And they just started going to the moon, right? Microsoft starts taking off like crazy. So people start going more into tech. And of course, what happens? S&P outdoes it. It's up around 197%. But you look at the utilities, up 150% during that last bull run. And then 2020 hits, and that changes the game right there. I mean, look at that. And of course, everybody went to big tech, and now the SPY handily has outperformed and stuff until, of course, recently you look at what's going on over the last month. You can see, obviously, utilities up 17%, SPY up 5%. What is that, in the last 3 months? And so don't let people tell you just that, paint that narrative. There's a lot more to the picture than that. You got to look at more than just utilities to say things are going to be bad if this is going up. Yes, utilities are considered defensive. I've showed it on the chart before. Usually it's healthcare and staples going with them as well. Okay, and there's other things you have to look at. But just understand, and let me know if that surprised you, that during those two, especially that bull market from 03 to 07, utilities outperformed the SPY that easily. Okay. Now, when it comes to earnings, some big ones tomorrow, you're going to have BABA, Home Depot, C, Sony, Intuitive, right? And then in the afternoon, nothing really to speak of. But when it comes to economic data, here we are, PPI, core PPI and headline PPI is going to come out. Another thing you're going to have this week is 11 FOMC speakers. Okay, they're at different kind of venues. Some are actually testifying in front of Congress. Some are just going to do their normal speeches and stuff. And so again, we'll have to listen, to what their message is going to be conveying. Recently it is higher for longer. Okay, or maybe we see 1 rate cut, 2 rate cuts, whatever. The market's kind of really just been ignoring what the Fed speakers have been saying. To be honest with you, it's really, as I showed you, even the big boys have been ignoring what's going on with the 10-year, whether it's going up or down, intraday, whatever. They don't seem to really care too much as the interest rate sensitive stocks that have been responding to it and stuff. So we'll see what happens again with PPI. It's pre-market, so we're going to know. Okay, if you see rates drop, that means PPI came in line or under. And if that happens, where do you think the market's going? Okay, and then we got CPI, don't forget, on Wednesday, the very next day. So big days, big red folder news. So please hit that like and subscribe button on your way out. Appreciate it, guys. Feel free to sign up for the membership. Hit that subscribe button again, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.